Hello, everybody. I'm Georgi Leshtarsky, and welcome to the Creative Insider, a podcast which is about succeeding in any field of creativity. So, hi and welcome. I wanted first to introduce myself. My name is Georgi, and I'm your personal creative insider. I'm a 27-year-old architect, and I'm currently living in Germany. I was born in Bulgaria, and at the age of 7, I moved together with my family to a small town southern of Rome called Nettuno. And there was where I grew up. Since my early age, I have shown interest in visual arts. And after mid school, I was already thinking, is there any chance I can turn this into my job? How could I turn it into my job? So I decided to start studying in a high school of arts in Rome. That was a very great experience. That was a really great experience in a city as Rome, which probably is one of the best cities in the world to study art, and it's very rich artistically speaking, and it's a very awesome and unique city. In that school, after my third year, I needed to choose a field of specialization among painting, sculpture, and design and architecture. So I went for design and architecture, which was the most interesting to me. And another very driving factor about it was that I that time thought it's a very universal practice and I can try to turn it into my job all around the globe, which is very important to me because I have this very international background, and for me, it's important to be able to move and practicing my job everywhere. After school, I have taken and thankfully successfully passed the admission test for the Faculty of Architecture at the University La Sapienza, and I started studying there. Studying architecture is not easy at all, and it requires hard work and a lot of dedication, long hours, long nights. And the economical situation in the country wasn't looking good at all. There were a lot of uncertainty about the chance finding a job in the field of architecture after graduation. So I decided to try to turn out my path and my career path. So I undertook the possibility of getting a scholarship for an Erasmus exchange experience in Germany, in Frankfurt, where I'm still living. When I came here, I found a very different city than Rome. Frankfurt is a very modern city, rich of skyscrapers. The nickname of the city is Manhattan because it looks like a little Manhattan on the River Main. And I fell in love with the city in the moment I arrived. And I told myself, here is the place. Here I want to live and I want to stay. Here I got to know many people from all over the world, from all around the world. Here I got to know people from everywhere, from all around the globe. And it was an awesome experience in the beginning. I started learning German, and after only 4 months, I managed to speak and understand very basic level of the German language. So I tried, and after a couple of interviews, I managed to land my first job as an intern in an architecture studio, very local for the city of Frankfurt. So I've started this job at this firm. It was very stressful in the beginning because I had never seen the inside of a architectural studio before that. And the most I've worked there, the most I realized just how much I didn't know about the real deal field of architecture and how all the mechanism of the industry works. So here is where the idea to create a podcast which is addressed to all young creatives, students of any creative field or rookies in the creative fields started. I want to discuss skills which are not taught in schools, like effectiveness, communication, productivity, time management, leadership, entrepreneurship, and many more. All of those skills which basically you don't get to learn in the university while studying, but are very, very helpful when you transition to the professional level. So, in some of the episode of this podcast, I will be sharing some of my own experiences. I will review some books I have read, which have helped me a lot to understand in a better way the job and the sides of being a creative. In the end of the day, we'll be discussing skills which could be useful for everyone to figure out how it works in the creative industry. Concept which most of the times people need to figure out the hard way, which is through struggle, failure, and yeah, try to help you to avoid the same mistakes I've made in my earlier stage of my career. But let's talk about why I've choose to start this platform with a podcast. So I've been listening to a lot of podcasts the last few years, and everything started a couple of years ago. I've read the biography of Elon Musk, which was very fascinating to me. I got really hypnotized from this figure. He is probably the most creative person on earth, which makes all his idea become reality. And after I read the book, I started looking for media and speeches, keynotes from him. And I found out this episode of the Joe Rogan Experience where Elon is the guest. It is about a 3 hour, very personal conversation, which was so awesome. I felt like I was there speaking to Elon, and I got fascinated about the medium of the podcast. But after I've listened to the podcast, I was like, hey, who is this guy, Joe Rogan, who can land Elon Musk to go to his podcast? And I started researching about Joe Rogan and other episodes. And from there, I started looking for different podcasts. I figured out that almost all of my favorite authors or famous figures I know were having a podcast or were going on other podcasts. And I've been listening to a lot of episodes while I was doing my creative process. Like I would go to work, sit down, get my tasks to do, and when I got focused into drawing some plans or details, I would just listen to a podcast along it, and I will learn many more things. Or during my morning run, I would play a podcast instead of some music, which is very relaxing. And this is how I felt in love with this medium. So after being a big consumer, I told myself, hey, why don't you start yourself a podcast? And it was the idea started growing in my head. I was thinking about it. I was a little procrastinating and I was a little scared of it because it's a new thing you have never done and you feel stupid and you feel it's useless to do it. But then I got courage and I finally decided to record and publish my first episode. The process of starting something new was very, very interesting because it's the white canvas in front of you and you need to start figuring out everything from the beginning. So I started researching how can I publish my podcast, how to find a name for the podcast, how to find the right format, how to start writing a script for this format. I started writing the script and correcting it. It was a very interesting process. I was looking for also which gear I needed to record a podcast. So I decided to be very resourceful in the beginning, which probably is the first skill I would suggest to a creative person, to be resourceful. So when you start looking for any kind of gear, you get overwhelmed from the amount of possibility you have in front. So a lot of microphones, a lot of gear, so I decided to start small and starting with my phone. So the first episode of the podcast will be registered with my phone. I hope the quality will be good enough. I'm trying to do it in the best way possible, and I hope that the content will be interesting enough for you that you like the podcast. And I'll be also glad to hear your feedback so I can tweak my podcast and improve it. But remember, starting small, it's actually cool. In anything you try to create, starting small, it's always the best. Because if you imagine also our favorite successful stories are about people who started small and ended up being successful. Like, take, for example, Apple. Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs didn't start in a fancy office building building the best computers in the world. They started in a backyard, in a garage, and then from there, slowly, they built what is today the most loved technology company, probably. So you don't have to have the best gear and the best technology to start something which is good. You just need to start, believe in it, be consistent, and it will succeed sooner or later. I know it's very scary and this fear of sucking is big, but yeah, just don't be scared. Just try it out, no matter what your friends or family thinks, and do what you believe to do and what you think it's good. So basically, start with whatever you have in your hands, with whatever softwares, hardwares, gear in your art, and keep improving. That's it. So now a little bit back to the show. So as you can hear, it's in English. That's not my native language, but I wanted to do it in English because that give us a chance to have a bigger audience. And as my background, as I said, is very international, I wanted to make the show also more international, so that basically people from all around Europe and the globe can listen to the show and can take something from it. So, as I said in the first episode, I will be discussing some of the skills which I think are useful in the creative field. I will review books, and this format will be a solo format where there is me talking, and the length of the episode will be kept around 20-25 minutes, depending on the topic, on how well it can be developed. And each episode will be released on a weekly basis. I want to release each episode on Monday, so it's a way to kick in the new week, to have a podcast to listen to while driving to work, while starting your jogging in the morning. So starting the week with a podcast episode from the Creative Insider. And then in the time the podcast develops, I'll try to get some of the people I know to the podcast, which could share their own experiences in the creative field. I'll try to reach new people in the field which I already don't know personally, but I think can be inspirational figures to interview. And in the meanwhile, to reach that level of ability to speak on a podcast and improve the quality and get them to interview them. And we currently know that interviews are not easy to do in person because of the COVID-19 situation. So I hope we can do that soon. But in the meanwhile, if it's not possible, we'll try to have some internet interviews and record them and publish them on a weekly basis, as I said. And those interviews could have a little longer length, but I don't think there will be like the Joe Rogan Experience 3 hours, which is very long, and um, it's very hard to listen to a 3 hour podcast. So maybe around 1 hour, 1.5 hour. But yeah, depending on how interesting the guest will be and who the guest will be, and also the availability of the guest. So I think that's it for the first episode. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the Creative Insider. I'm sure that with time I will level up my podcast game. But yeah, as I said, important is to start and be brave and keep improving. So in the meanwhile, if you want to tune in with the channels of the podcast, I've created a LinkedIn page, so you can type into the LinkedIn search the Creative Insider and like the page. You can type the Creative Insider in Facebook, also like the page, or on Instagram. Also, there is a page about the podcast, which is at TCI Podcast, the Creative Insider Podcast. Okay, so thank you for listening, yo, and see you next week. Bye.